So this morning's devotional, the Pray As You Go app, it began with a beautiful song uh, celebrating the idea that God dwells with us, and I think that's a powerful reminder for me this morning that God is the one, that we see in Jesus, that God is the one who um, is with us, is present, and that's something that I think I know I can take for granted or forget sometimes, but I think that's a powerful reminder of who God is. That God is the one who enters into our stories to redeem them and restore them. And so the text that we heard from this morning was Matthew 14, um, starting with verse 22. And Jesus had just fed 5,000 people, and he dismisses the crowd, and he goes into the boat, or he it sends the disciples ahead into a boat on to go on to the other side, and so immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. After he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened. Beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." Um, I think there are two things that kind of stood out to me this morning as I sat with that text. Um, we see the one who eventually comes to defeat death, right? Jesus, of course, is crucified and then is resurrected and conquers death, and he hadn't done that yet in this story, but I believe he still had the power to do that. Uh, and so here we see that the one who is bigger than, more powerful than, greater than death itself is there dwelling among the disciples during their season of challenge. As short a season as it might have been, it was a season of challenge that had very present and very real threats. Right there's heavy waves, there's wind, um, battering, and waves battering against the boat, and then there's obviously with that there's the fear of drowning. Like there's very present danger here, and so the fears are merited. They're honest, they're true, and yet there Jesus is in the midst of that, and he's present with them in ways that don't necessarily abandon any sense of uncertainty that the disciples had. Right, Peter, they see him, and at first he seems like a ghost, and yet Peter says, "Well, if it's you, tell me to come to you." And Jesus says, "Come." And so then the second thing that I noticed is, in the same day, even within the same minute, uh, I think we need to be honest with ourselves in the sense that we may find in the same moment that we could demonstrate a reckless abandon and reckless faith and a very powerful sort of getting it right moment in expressing our faith in Jesus, like just like Peter does. He gets out of the boat and he's walking on water. I mean, we may have that moment of like, man, I am just getting it right with Jesus right now. Like I'm crushing it. Like I'm stepping out of the boat. I'm walking on water. I'm doing all the things. I'm doing what Jesus does. I am a follower of him, and I'm accomplishing supernatural things in his name for his glory, and I'm doing great, awesome stuff. And then the very next moment, we could find ourselves abandoning that faith, and we're sinking down, and we're blowing it, we're messing it up, and we have to cry out, Lord, save me. And I think for me, that was a reminder of what discipleship in Jesus looks like. One minute you might just be nailing it, and then the next you're absolutely drowning in your own lack of faith. And all the while, Jesus is there, and when we cry out to us, he's willing to pull us up. So a great reminder for me this morning that Jesus is Emmanuel. Jesus is God with us. I can get it right and I'm very wrong in the same day, in the same minute, and God's grace is there. God is there, present with us in the good times, in the bad times. That there are real fears out there, that and the fears, the threats in this life are not, they're not things that sort of prove that God is not with us. But I would say, I think in some ways, the times that we find ourselves facing threats, those are the moments that we really can lean into and look for the ways that God is present with us in powerful ways. So may we celebrate God's presence with us this morning. May we acknowledge that today, yes, today, we will get it right and we will get it wrong. And God is with us throughout all of it. And the threats we are facing are very real, and they don't deny God's existence. But I think if we're willing, they might help us confirm that God is right there with us in the midst of it. Amen.